Let me ask you a fourth time. Would it help if President Lopez Obrador, I don't think it's a complicated question, Madam Administrator. You're asking us for more money every year, more money, and it gets worse, worse, and worse. You know, in the real world, the nitty-gritty of the real world, when you fail, you get fired. In government, when you fail, you get more money because obviously you need it. Now, let me ask you a fourth time. If President Lopez Obrador, and I'd appreciate an answer, if President Lopez Obrador invited the American military and our law enforcement personnel to come into Mexico and work with his, we could stop the cartels, couldn't we?
Hello, Patriots. Welcome back to Signal 76, where we cut through the noise and deliver the hard truths that the mainstream media won't tell you. Today, we're diving deep into a congressional hearing that perfectly encapsulates everything that's wrong with our current administration's approach to the fentanyl crisis that's literally killing our children, our neighbors, and destroying American families across this great nation. Before we get started, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is growing because patriots like you are hungry for the truth, and YouTube's algorithm tries to suppress content that challenges the establishment narrative. Your subscription, your like, and your comment telling me what you think helps us reach more Americans who need to hear this message. Stay with me until the end, because I'm going to break down exactly why this hearing reveals the complete failure of Biden's foreign policy and his administration's refusal to take the decisive action needed to protect American lives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Administrator, the two cartels that are sending fentanyl into the United States are located in Mexico, aren't they?
Yes, sir.
And isn't it a fact that we could stop those cartels in their tracks if President Lopez Obrador would invite American military and or law enforcement personnel to come into Mexico and work with his military and law enforcement personnel?
Senator, what I would say from my purview as the head of the DEA...
But is my statement true or not?
What I would say is that we're focused on the two cartels, who we believe are doing exactly what you say. They're responsible for the fentanyl coming
Let me
into
ask
the
you
United
again.
States.
If President Lopez Obrador invited the American military and or American law enforcement officials to come into Mexico to work with the same in Mexico, we could stop the cartels, could we not?
Senator, I believe this is a whole of government effort and has to be, including whether it's the military, us, FBI,
Now,
and others.
Madam Administrator, I've listened to you here for almost an hour telling us how bad fentanyl is. Thank you for that, but we know.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you a third time. If President Lopez Obrador invited the American military and or law enforcement personnel to come into Mexico and work with the same in Mexico, we could stop the cartels. Isn't that a fact?
So, Senator, I can speak to the law enforcement side of this, and you just mentioned law enforcement. I believe that this is vital for both Mexico and the United States. Mexicans are dying as well, as we showed in the Chapito.
Well, then why don't we stop them?
So
would it help? Let me ask you a fourth time. Would it help if President Lopez Obrador, I don't think it's a complicated question, Madam Administrator. You're asking us for more money every year, more money, and it gets worse, worse, and worse. You know, in the real world, the nitty-gritty of the real world, when you fail, you get fired. In government, when you fail, you get more money because obviously you need it. Now, let me ask you a fourth time. If President Lopez Obrador, and I'd appreciate an answer, if President Lopez Obrador invited the American military and or law enforcement personnel to come into Mexico and work with his, we could stop the cartels, couldn't we?
I believe, Senator, that we can stop the cartels.
Okay, have you made that suggestion to President Biden?
If I could, I believe that we can stop the cartels by...
Have you made that suggestion to President Biden?
Senator, I have been very vocal in the whole of government setting on the importance of fentanyl and all of us using every single effort and authority that we have.
Why hasn't President Biden done it? I mean, this is the way the American people whose sons and daughters are dying look at it. Our economy is $23 trillion. Mexico's economy is $1.3 trillion. Ours is 18 times bigger. We buy $400 billion every year from Mexico. Without the people of America, Mexico, figuratively speaking, would be eating cat food out of a can and living in a tent behind an outback. So why don't you and the president, embarrassing no one, get on the phone and call President Lopez Obrador and make him a deal he can't refuse to allow our military and our law enforcement officials to go into Mexico and work with his to stop the cartels? Why don't you do that?
Senator, what I am doing every single day is working with the incredible men and women of DEA who are risking their lives across 334 offices worldwide.
And I appreciate that, but you're not
fentanyl.
doing what would work. Why won't you do what will work?
Senator,
why don't you call the president this afternoon and say, Mr. President, let's call President Lopez Obrador privately and make him a deal he can't refuse. Because we both know that President Lopez Obrador has neither the ability nor the will to stop the cartels. But yet we go along and pretend that they're our friends, and Mexico is our friend. But he has criminal organizations that are killing our people. And you know how to stop it. And the president does. And you're not doing it.
Senator, we are working every day to stop it.
But you're not doing what would stop it.
We are transforming, and we are working in countless ways across the globe to do what needs to be done for the American people. And there is nothing that the men and
when
women...
it's important to you, you make it happen. When it's not important to you, you make an excuse.
What you're about to see is a senator trying to get straight answers from a DEA administrator about the Mexican cartels that are flooding our streets with fentanyl, and the bureaucratic stonewalling that follows is absolutely infuriating. This isn't just about policy differences, patriots. This is about life and death. This is about American sovereignty and our government's primary responsibility to protect its citizens. Let me set the stage for you. We have a senator asking the most logical, straightforward question imaginable. He's asking whether we could stop the cartels if Mexico's President Lopez Obrador would invite American military and law enforcement to work jointly in Mexico. It's a simple yes or no question, but watch how the DEA administrator dances around it like she's auditioning for Dancing with the Stars instead of running a federal agency tasked with stopping the flow of deadly drugs into our communities. This is the same administration that can mobilize resources overnight to protect Ukraine's borders, but can't seem to figure out how to protect our own southern border. They can send billions of dollars in military equipment halfway around the world, but when it comes to dealing with the cartels that are literally at our doorstep, suddenly everything becomes complicated and requires a whole-of-government approach. The senator in this hearing is asking the right questions, and he's doing what every American should be doing. He's demanding accountability. He's pointing out that year after year, these agencies come to Congress asking for more money, more resources, more funding, and year after year, the problem gets worse. In the real world, if you fail at your job repeatedly, you get fired. In government, if you fail at your job repeatedly, you get a bigger budget and more excuses. Let's talk about the numbers the senator mentions, because they tell the whole story. America's economy is $23 trillion. Mexico's economy is $1.3 trillion. Our economy is 18 times bigger than theirs. We buy $400 billion worth of goods from Mexico every year. Without American consumers, Mexico's economy would collapse overnight. We hold all the leverage in this relationship, yet we're acting like we're the ones who need to beg for cooperation. The senator puts it perfectly when he says that without American trade, Mexico would figuratively be eating cat food out of a can and living in a tent behind an Outback steakhouse. That might sound harsh, but it's the economic reality, and sometimes the truth hurts. We have the economic power to force Mexico's hand on this issue, but this administration refuses to use it because they're more concerned with being liked by foreign leaders than protecting American lives. Think about this from a business perspective, which is something this administration clearly doesn't understand. If you're doing business with someone and that business relationship is enabling them to profit while simultaneously allowing criminal organizations to poison your customers, you don't just keep writing checks and hope things get better. You use your leverage. You make demands. You set conditions. But that's not what's happening here. Instead, we have a DEA administrator who can't give a straight answer to a straight question. When asked directly whether joint operations with American military and law enforcement could stop the cartels, she deflects. She talks about whole-of-government approaches and working with incredible men and women in the DEA, which is all fine and good, but it doesn't answer the fundamental question. The cartels operating in Mexico aren't some mysterious, unstoppable force. They're criminal organizations that exist because they're allowed to exist. They operate because the Mexican government either can't or won't stop them. The senator makes this point crystal clear when he says that López Obrador has neither the ability nor the will to stop the cartels, but we continue to pretend that Mexico is acting in good faith as our partner. This is where American leadership should step in. This is where we should be making the kind of deal that the senator suggests, a deal that López Obrador can't refuse. Not because we're trying to be bullies, but because American lives are at stake, because our children are dying, because fentanyl is now the leading cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. Let me put this in perspective for you. More Americans die from fentanyl overdoses every year than died in the entire Vietnam War. We're losing more Americans to fentanyl in 2 years than we lost in 20 years of fighting in Afghanistan. This isn't a policy debate anymore. This is a national emergency, and it requires the kind of decisive action that built this country and made us the most powerful nation on earth. The frustration in that senator's voice should be the frustration of every American parent, every American who's lost someone to this crisis, every American who understands that our government's first job is to protect us, not to worry about hurting the feelings of foreign leaders who are failing to control criminal organizations in their own countries. When a senator asks why President Biden hasn't picked up the phone to call López Obrador and make this deal, the silence is deafening. When he asks whether the DEA administrator has suggested this approach to the president, we get more bureaucratic word salad about being vocal in whole-of-government settings. That's not leadership. That's not action. That's the kind of weak, ineffective governance that Americans are sick and tired of. We need to understand what's really happening here. The cartels aren't just drug dealers. They're sophisticated criminal enterprises that control territory, corrupt officials, and operate with military-grade weapons and equipment. They're essentially narco-terrorists, and they're operating right on our border with impunity. Any serious country would treat this as the national security threat that it is. But instead of treating it like the existential threat it represents, we're getting bureaucratic excuses and deflections. We're getting administrators who can't answer simple questions about whether they've even suggested the most obvious solutions to the people making the decisions. We're getting policies that treat the symptoms while ignoring the disease. The senator's point about making excuses versus making things happen cuts right to the heart of the problem. When something is truly important to you, when something is truly a priority, you find a way to make it happen. You don't accept excuses. You don't settle for half measures. You use every tool at your disposal to achieve the objective. America has the military capability to help Mexico eliminate these cartels. We have the law enforcement expertise. We have the intelligence capabilities. We have the economic leverage. What we apparently don't have is the political will to use any of these advantages because this administration is more concerned with maintaining diplomatic niceties than protecting American lives. This is the same administration that's perfectly willing to sanction countries halfway around the world. But when it comes to holding Mexico accountable for allowing criminal organizations to operate on their territory and poison Americans, suddenly everything becomes complicated and nuanced. Patriots, this hearing represents everything that's wrong with how our government operates today. We have bureaucrats who can't give straight answers to straight questions. We have administrators who come to Congress year after year asking for more money to continue failing at their primary mission. We have an administration that refuses to use America's considerable leverage to protect American lives. The men and women of the DEA who are risking their lives every day deserve better leadership than this. The American families who have lost loved ones to fentanyl deserve better than bureaucratic excuses. The communities that are being devastated by this crisis deserve leaders who are willing to take decisive action instead of hoping that somehow, some way, things will get better on their own. This is why elections matter. This is why we need leaders who understand that America's strength comes from being willing to use our advantages to protect our people, not from being liked by foreign leaders who are failing to control criminal organizations in their own countries. We need leaders who understand that sometimes being a good neighbor means having difficult conversations and making difficult demands. The cartels understand strength and weakness. They understand leverage and consequences. They understand that as long as there are no real consequences for their actions, they can continue operating with impunity. What they don't understand is weakness disguised as diplomacy, and that's exactly what they're getting from this administration. Every day we wait, more Americans die. Every day we accept excuses instead of demanding action, more families are destroyed. Every day we pretend that somehow this problem will solve itself. We make it worse. The senator in this hearing understands this. He understands that when you have leverage, you use it. When you have advantages, you press them. When American lives are at stake, you do whatever it takes to protect them. That's the kind of leadership America needs, and that's the kind of leadership this administration has failed to provide. Subscribe to this channel because we're going to keep holding these people accountable. Like this video because YouTube needs to know that Americans want the truth, not propaganda. Comment below and tell me what you think about this administration's failure to protect American lives. The time for excuses is over. The time for bureaucratic word salad is over. The time for pretending that somehow this problem will solve itself is over. American lives are at stake, and it's time our government started acting like it. Stay vigilant, patriots. Stay informed, and remember that your voice matters, your vote matters, and your country needs you now more than ever.